Nick Santonastasso. He is a global keynote speaker. He's an entrepreneur. He's a best-selling author. He was born with something that's called Hanhart syndrome, given less than a 30% chance to actually survive that. And he turned that adversity into purpose and how he's going to impact millions of people. He's got over 4 million followers, over 1 billion views across social media. He helps executives, entrepreneurs, leaders, salespeople become who they want to be. He's the co-owner of a We Level Up company. He advocates for mental health and addiction recovery, helping thousands change their lives. Been featured in Forbes, BBC, Netflix, everything that you can think of. Spoken on stage with Tony Robbins, Steve Forbes, Deepak Chopra. And through his speaking, his training, it transforms you into opportunities that you might never thought that you could do. Nick, all the way from Dubai. How are you, man?
I'm outstanding, brother. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. And
Yeah.
yeah, the power of technology, we can do this from across the world. So pretty cool.
Yeah. I love that, man. We're going to have to get into into Dubai. I love this. So I want to start off with this question. So I don't know a lot about Hanhart syndrome, and everybody watching us here or listening to us, they might not know about this. What is it?
For sure. So Hanhart syndrome is a super rare genetic disorder that
Yeah.
either leaves the babies with undeveloped limbs or undeveloped organs. And so at the time of my birth in 1996, I was actually the 12th baby in medical history that they've
Yeah.
ever seen this happen to. And out of the 12, 8 of those babies passed away due to undeveloped organs. And so
Yeah.
even before I was born, the doctors told my parents I had about a 30% chance to live. They told them, institutionalize them if he survives, or abort him, or don't go through with it. And
Yeah.
my parents decided to focus on that 30% chance of me living versus the 70% chance of me dying.
Yeah.
And the lesson there is you don't get the life you have, you get the life you focus on. And so my
That's right.
parents decided to focus on the opportunity
Yeah.
versus the not so good,
Yeah.
went forth with it, and now Baby Yoda is here.
I love the mindset of your parents here, because that's a blessing that you're here. Can I ask you, what was it like as a kid growing up with your condition?
Of course. So early on, right, as we all know, most of our beliefs in our model of the world is cultivated between 0 and 8, 0 and 7. And
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, you can have all your arms and all your legs, yet still be handicapped and crippled by your upbringing. It's all conditioning, right? And so for me, the greatest strength in the beginning that my parents gave me was I was their final child. So I was the fourth. So they had some split testing, I think. They had some a little bit more experience.
Yeah.
And they said, hey, my dad was like, if we don't create an environment, if we create an easy environment for him, he's going to get smacked in the face by reality when we're not around. And my
Yeah.
dad, being the man, was like, hey, like, I'm not going to be around forever, and
Yeah.
so we have to treat him normal. And so my
Mm,
dad didn't put little loops on things and didn't
mm,
put stepping stools all over the house. And from the early age, they would put my clothes in front of me and like figure it out, or they would put
yeah.
my food in front of me and say figure it out. And
Yeah.
as I look back as an adult and as a leader, there was two really profound things that
Yeah.
they programmed my brain. The first
Mm,
thing was I was used to failure.
mm,
Like, Jeremy, failure was just a part of the process. I knew that it was a friend, it wasn't a foe. And I knew that the faster that I failed, the faster that I got some data, and then I could succeed. And if we look in life, for those that are doing better than you, or you think they're on a higher level, they just failed more than you have. They were in the game longer than you've been. And the
mm.
second thing that was invaluable was I was programmed to be solution oriented.
Okay.
Oftentimes one of the biggest patterns that holds most people back is they're always focused on all the things that they don't want, so they
Yeah.
get more of the things that they don't want. And
Sure.
so I was programmed to be solution oriented,
Yeah.
and that was the good side of the upbringing. But of course, there
Hey,
were some other things.
yeah, you are who you focus on most of the time. You are who you associate yourself with. So thank heavens to your parents, like allowed you to be able to learn those life necessary skills, and they just didn't coddle you. Where if they had done that, you might have looked at yourself as like, I'm a victim, and the reason why I don't have what I want is because of my circumstances, right? And that is so true, because I went to school to become a psychologist, and a lot of that is, we're studying child psychology, and your belief systems, most of them are formed between the ages of 4 and 13. They're about 95% established by the time you leave school. So, like, as a parent, if you guys are watching and listening to me and Nick here, these are things you have to start instilling in your children, where, like Nick said, you got to teach them, like, hey, nobody's going to come save you. You got to learn skills. You got to figure this out. We're here to support you, but nobody's going to come save you. I love that, man. You have amazing parents. Now, I want to get into this because I think you said something, really important there. And Tony Robbins talks about this all the time.
Hey guys, Jeremy Miner here. Look, a lot of you leave comments wanting me to help you sell more. So the easiest way to get a hold of me, the quickest way, is to text me. So text me right now. It's 480-637-2944. So 480-637-2944. Listen, I started this company to help you learn how to close more deals, but do it the right way. Text me right now. Let's get back to the training video.
Life doesn't happen to you, life happens for you, right? Because had this not happened, you might not be who you are. You wouldn't be able
100%.
to impact the millions of people you impact, right? Okay, so you're older. How did you get involved in public speaking? What happened there?
Yeah. So I believe that my dad is always like weirdly right. And so even
Yeah,
when I was a young kid, one of my fears was like, how am I going to provide as a man? Right? How
yeah,
am I going to, a man with no legs of an arm? I don't want to rely on anyone. I don't want to rely on the government. Like, how am I going to produce? And
mm,
again, my parents, like my mom's philosophy was like, as long as you're happy, I'm happy. And my dad was like, you could be happy, but you need to make some cash, you need to make some money. And so I got
yeah,
both of those philosophies from them.
yeah.
And so I got into speaking by, I believe, divinely guided into
Yeah.
speaking. Now, early
Okay.
on, my dad was like, you could be a sports announcer, you could be a speaker. And I'm like, Dad, I don't want to speak, being 15, 16 years old.
Sure. Yeah.
And actually how this all started was after I pursued bodybuilding. I moved to Florida when I was about 20 years old.
Okay.
And just to give context to the audience is like I'm not born in a family that does personal development. Like
Yeah.
we don't journal, we don't do healing work, like we like I only know what I know. And so
Yeah.
when I moved to Florida, I was roughly 20 years old. And
Okay.
one of my mutual friends, he says, "Hey man, I'm holding like a little mastermind at my house."
Okay.
And I'm like, what's a mastermind? And he's like,
Yeah.
where, people sit around and like think about things. And I'm like, dude, I have, like, yeah, great. I have no idea. And
Yeah.
so I go to this mastermind, which is about 8 people, and everybody's sharing their story. And I started to share my story. And
Yeah.
there was a man to the left of me that I've never met in my life before. And he was like, you're going to be on stage with Tony Robbins one day.
Yeah.
And my response was, who's Tony Robbins? Like, guys, I know nothing. And he's like, I don't know. I got a download.
Mm.
He's like, I'll actually work for you for free. And if you like the work we do, maybe we'll create something together.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know you, don't trust you. And
Yeah.
I decided to jump into the speaking world. And at first the strategy was like, just share your story to anyone. So we would go to like security guards and I would share my story. And we would go to like a school and I try to share my story, like whatever it took. And of
Okay.
course, like we were new entrepreneurs. So
Mm.
we believe, as Tony teaches, success leaves clues. And so we found some of the best books and the best people and
Sure.
started studying them. But I
Yeah.
got into speaking because someone saw a gift in me that I didn't see myself.
Yeah.
And for those that are listening right now, it's like probably one of the very reasons why Jeremy's in your life is because he saw the potential in you before you saw your own potential. And
Sure.
that's the power of a visionary.
I love this. So this is really important because you said something that's really remarkable there when you said like at first, I just went and they just had me speak and just tell my story, right? Now, obviously, because you wouldn't be at the level you're at in public speaking, that telling the story is not enough. It's how
Mm,
you frame the story that gives the impact to your audience. Tell us a little bit about how you like went from just telling your story to
yeah.
framing the story the right way to actually cause people to change habits and change behaviors to get them to the next level, because those are two completely different things.
100%. And thanks for this question because I get to go nerdy and most people don't take me this deep. So I'm
We're
ready to
very
rock
nerdy
here.
here.
So yeah, and in the beginning, I was just a professional storyteller, just sharing my story. Even now, I'm like, we make fun is like, if I can do it, you can do it. Like that's all I had. And then, the law of exposure states is like, once you're exposed, you can never be unexposed again. And I went to my first Tony Robbins event, and I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
Like this guy held the audience for 13 hours and we cried and we screamed and we yelled. And I was like, that's not speaking. I was like, oh, there's levels to
Yeah.
this.
Mm.
And of course, Tony, as my mentor, teaches like over deliver, provide more value than anyone else. And so when I saw communication and transformational facilitation at the highest level, I knew that I had a lot of work to do. I had a ton of work to do. And if I
Yeah.
hung around with the goat, he would collapse
Yeah.
time for me. And so let me
Yeah.
give some strategies for the people that are listening to take your communication to the next level.
Yeah.
I
We love it.
think the first one that is super, super powerful is what we call the I versus you transition, or I versus you statement. So
Mhm.
what that means is most speakers get on stage and they just vomit at the mouth and throw their story on other people, right? They don't even ask for permission. They actually just vomit,
Yeah.
right? But the big shift is inserting this I versus you transition. So for example, I can say, as a man with no legs or an arm, I grew up and there was a lot of times with women, I felt insecure. I felt inadequate. Now here comes the transition. I'm
Mhm.
just curious with a show of hands, how many of you
Mhm.
in here have ever felt inadequate or less than? Now, with those transitions and those psychological buy-ins, my story then becomes their story. My
Yeah.
story, I'm able to mirror and they can see themselves. So that's one small shift. But I
Yeah.
think one of the most powerful techniques is understanding that the greatest communicators and the greatest leaders don't
Mhm.
necessarily give people the answers. And a
Mhm.
lot of times, like if Jeremy and I stood up here and we're like, this is the way you should live life, you'd probably be like, screw off. But
Yeah.
the real transformation happens when you ask the right question to lead the audience to their own breakthrough, to their own insight, to their own awareness. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
the power of asking questions inside of your keynote will
Mhm.
take people to a
Mhm.
place that they've never been before. And because they've been to a place they've never been before, they will always remember you.
Yeah, it's called chunking in the world I come from, psychology. So you're giving them little chunks in the beginning that leads to be able to give them bigger chunks. It's like in the Bible, you give them the milk before the meat, right? If you give
Hmm.
too much meat in the beginning, people can't take that. It's like little chunks that lead to the bigger chunks that they can then absorb. And you're exactly right. When you're going into like a story, that frame, because everybody can tell stories, it's only the ones who are committed to mastery who know how to frame the story that moves an audience like you or like a Tony Robbins or somebody, where they actually stay engaged for hours on time rather than getting on their phone, rather than going to the bathroom 7 times, rather than staying out there. And that's a skill set that you learn. No one is born with that, right? Nobody's born with advanced questioning skills. Nobody is born with advanced tonality skills and verbal pacing and fluctuating my tone to trigger different emotional drivers. I love that. Who did you learn some of that from?
It's a great question. So I probably spend a few hundred hours
Mm-hmm.
in a room with Tony. And
Okay.
so I got to watch interventions, I got to watch all the stories, like
Mm-hmm.
exactly where he's going to go.
Yeah.
And also, I listen to where my mentors learn from. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's no Tony Robbins without Jim Rohn. There's no
Mm-hmm.
Nick without Tony.
Yeah.
So Jim Rohn as well. Jim Rohn had his seminars mastered to the T, where at the exact point he dropped the eraser and he would share the joke the same way. And so I studied like a beast. And
Yeah.
also I will say, and I think this can relate to the audience, is a lot of my mastery came from me just feeling inadequate. And
Mm-hmm.
so I would do whatever it took to get an edge. I would do whatever it took to feel enough. I would do whatever it took
Yeah.
to want to be
Yeah.
loved. And
Yeah.
that's not sustainable forever, but it did get me to a good level.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so I would say Tony was a big influence. Another massive influence for me is Myron Golden.
Sure. I know
Myron
Myron.
Golden really,
Okay.
really, yeah, really, really helped me with enrolling heart-centered storytelling,
Yeah.
sales, right? Because
Yeah.
there's a lot of people who are great speakers, but the moment they go into the offer, their
Yeah.
whole physiology changes and they're done,
Yeah.
And
Because they
so
don't know
those are
they
some
don't know
of
how to
my main
frame
teachers.
the opera, right? Tony says this. I like to take it a step further. It's the way you know you're an amazing communicator or an amazing speaker, since you focus on speaking on stage, is how people pay you with their wallet. If they just get up and clap and say, really, really good job, we really liked it, there's a lot that you're missing here that you still haven't mastered, right? You know that you're a great speaker, that you're mastering speaking when you have a lot of people who pay when you go into your offer, because they know that you're the expert who can solve their problems and get them where they want to be. Whereas, 3 hours before, they didn't know who you were at all, or maybe they knew you a little bit, but they didn't know what they didn't know. They didn't know what their real problems were. They didn't believe in themselves. And I always say, if you're selling, and everybody watching and listening to us here, if you're selling 1-to-1, or if you're selling 1 to 5 or 6, if you're in B2B sales, or if you're on stage like Nick, and maybe you're making an offer in front of 5,000 people, okay? It all comes down to how you frame the offer. Now, what do I mean by that? And then I've got a lot of really good questions I want to ask you, Nick, that everybody wants to know. If there's two pictures, I was talking with Dan Henry, a friend of mine the other day about this. Let's say you have two family pictures, right? You know the pictures, right? Your mom and your dad, you're sitting here, family picture up on the mantle, right? So everybody vision your family picture. See that family picture, okay? Same picture. Now you got to go out and buy a frame for those two pictures. Let's say you go to the store and you buy this immaculate frame. It's like all gold. It just, it looks like Trump Towers or something. It just looks exotic, like a frame in Dubai. Okay. And it looks amazing. Then you go to the flea market and you buy the other frame for the same picture. And it's cracked. It's got holes in it, cobwebs. It's like a $2 frame, just looks really cheap and bad. Which picture are you going to pick? You're going to pick the one that was framed the best. Because in the prospect's mind, whether you're on stage, whether you're one-on-one, whether you're, 1 to 5, everybody's offer, everybody's solution all kind of seems the same in their mind. But the one who wins the audience, who wins the sale, who wins anything, is the one who simply knew how to frame that offer better. You with me on that? Okay.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Right. And I believe too, just in addition, is people will buy based on their identity.
Yeah.
Right. So there are people that would go for the cheap one because they're cheap people.
Yeah.
But if they're premium people like us, that are willing to execute and want to get to the next level, they're going to take the pretty frame for sure.
Yeah. And I love what you said there, because you can take, like Myron says, the cheapo people and the freepo people, whatever. And it's your job as the salesperson. Everybody listen to this. It's really important. It's your job as a sales professional to be able to build anyone into the identity of a person who does buy. Just like Nick said. I'm going to repeat that. Nick said something brilliant here. It's your job as a salesperson through mastery to build any person into the identity of the person who does buy. You're building them into a buyer. I love that, Nick. Okay, let's go through this. So you get into public speaking, you talked a little bit about everybody has a chip on their shoulder. I believe everybody has a chip on their shoulder. It could be a kid who grew up poor and now just driven by never wants to feel poor again. It could be a really wealthy kid who kids made fun of him or her because they felt like they were fed with the silver spoon. It could be somebody in your situation. There's always that chip. Tom Brady had a chip on his shoulder, right? Most people don't activate their chip, and that's why they stay average. You activated your chip. What chip did you have that drove you?
Yeah. And mine was wanting to be loved. But I think, to be honest, just to be super transparent, it was girls.
Okay.
My chip was like, girls didn't like me. So if I could become rich, if I can become in shape, if I could get a bunch of followers, build big audiences, like then I'll be loved. And you realize later on in that pursuit that nothing materialistic will fill a spiritual hole. And so, but it's a journey you have to go through. But in the beginning, my friend, it was like, I want the tattoos and the muscles and the money and the cars because I want to be loved, and then they'll love me, and so that was my chip that I activated. But yeah, I was counted out from the get-go. And I think for those that are listening, right, this is the art of transmutation. This is the art of sublimation. This is the art of taking something that is pissing you off and transmuting into something beautiful. You might as well channel your energy into something valuable. And so for those that haven't activated their chip, who knows what kind of monster you'd be if you did.
There's the potential you have. Okay, so that was the first chip you activated. It got you to a certain level. What's the chip that activates you now?
Yeah, my family. To make sure that my family doesn't have a boss, to make sure that my mom can go where she wants, when she wants, with the people I want. I can call my dad and say, hey, I'm in Italy, come grab dinner, I'll fly you out. My bloodline. That was my second chip of realizing that, wow, I've not only been born in this unique vessel, but the one that doesn't have legs is actually going to be the one that stepped up and breaks all the shackles within the lineage. And so I just retired my dad. And I'm plugging. It's one thing. Let me say this for everybody, because I know a lot of people have the intention to retire their parents. Yeah. Retire them, but stimulate them. You got to plug them into something so the brain keeps going. Like, don't leave them to mush. And so it's one thing to just send your parents money, but it's another thing, if you have your parents or whoever takes care of you or looked after you, is to plug them into an opportunity that fires them up. And so that was my second chip that I activated, was my family.
I love that. It's give them the mindset. It's like it's instead of just like, give them the fish and then the next day they're hungry. It's like teach them how to fish so they can just fish the rest of their life. I love that. Now, personal question. You lost your brother.
Mm.
How did that impact you?
Yeah. My my brother to me was like who I wanted to be. And
Mm.
so he was a short guy, but he was jacked. So he was always lifting, and then he went to the Marines. And so I looked up at him in that sense. And
Mm.
then he was an entrepreneur. Let's just say he was an entrepreneur, but in all the illegal ways.
Yeah.
But I all looked up to him in the sense that he always had money, he'd always take care of us, but he did it in all the ways that weren't so good.
Yeah.
And so he had passed from a heroin and fentanyl overdose. And so he was involved in that type of business and got wrapped up with the wrong crew. And that was a battle for years and years and years.
Yeah.
A few ways that affected me. The first, this is a rabbit hole, so cut me off whenever.
You're okay.
The first one was it took me 6 months to realize my brother was dead.
Yeah.
So it took me 6 months to process the emotion. Now, most of us listening, we just soothe with work. And so my brother died in the morning. I called my sisters and let them know that he was dead. And a few hours later, I was teaching teenagers on a Zoom call. Like I was no idea. And 6 months later, I'm cleaning out my messages and I see that my brother's text message is green and I lost it. And so the lesson in that is in order to heal it, you have to feel it. And most, especially men, you weren't taught to feel it. But I can assure you, I hope there's an emotionally advanced man that can trickle that down to you. Is you got to feel that stuff. But the
Yeah.
second thing was I realized you really realize your immortality,
Yeah.
especially as a young buck. You know how it is. Like when you're a young buck, you're invincible, and it ain't never going to stop. It's like this is just keep
Yeah.
keep going. And so for me, and this kind of scares people, but like every single day, I think about death.
Yeah.
How and death creates a level of urgency.
Mhm.
Death allows me to express my art without fear of rejection because I'm going to die one day and no one's going to remember me anyway. And
Yeah.
so it's this driver to me and it's curiosity, but it keeps me going.
I love that. I always say there's only two things you can take into the next life when you leave this life, and that's your love that you had for your family and your friends and others, your fellow man, and the knowledge you acquire. That's all that's going with you,
Mhm.
baby. Nothing else. How has this helped you be even more committed to impacting people on stages and even in mental health?
Yeah. I didn't know anything, to be honest, because I wasn't exposed to it. Addiction wasn't something that was in my awareness until my brother struggled with it. I didn't even know what heroin and fentanyl was until it happened in my own family.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I made a few promises. The first promise that I made was I won't stop communicating and I won't stop learning psychology because there's people with all their arms and all their legs and they're struggling. And I was like, maybe I could like if I should be on drugs. You know what I'm saying? Like I should be strung out. And even if I was strung out, they would clap and be like, yeah, of course, look at him. You know what I'm saying? And so I've taken the total opposite route. And so I committed to not stopping the mastery and not stopping the communication. And then the other thing was I just by the divinely guided, I got brought into alcohol and drug rehab centers. And now, so now I have ownership in facilities in America. And we bring the personal development work into the sobriety field because it's one thing to get sober. What's next? Let's integrate, let's develop beliefs and values. And so that's how those worlds have merged. And I feel like
Yeah.
that was my brother's gift of like, hey, I'm gonna nudge you over on this path that you need to be in as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's really about, with that type of stuff, instead of saying like, "Oh, I'm an alcoholic," or "Oh, I'm addicted to drugs," even when you're off of it, if you keep saying that to yourself, that's who you believe you are. That's who your identity is, and that's why you probably will relapse. But if you start to change your identity into a different person, into who you want to be, you'll never say that you're an alcoholic. You'll never say that you're addicted to drugs. You never want to say that stuff because your brain, like is going to believe what you tell it, what you put into it. And it reminds me what you just said here of there was a Larry King interview with Christopher Reeves. You remember Superman back in the day?
Yeah.
Remember he was like Superman, like women wanted to be with him, men wanted to be him, kids looked up to him, and then he became paralyzed, from the
Mm,
neck down. the last 10, 15 years of his life, And I remember Larry King interviewing him and, a bunch of questions he asked, but I remember one question stuck with me. And he said, Christopher Reeve, he's like, does it bother you that people had to come in today and help you do things? You used to be the strongest man in the world. Everybody looked up to you. You were the man. You were Superman. Everybody wanted to be you, right? Does it bother you? People had to come in here today and help you do things like go to the bathroom. Does it bother you that you are physically paralyzed? And I still remember what he said. He looked at Larry right in the eye and he said, "It does not bother me. But what does bother me is this. It bothers me that there are men and there are women out there who are physically able to do anything they want in their lives, yet they are paralyzed in their mind." And Nick, when I heard that, I was like, I love your story, man. So everybody listening to Nick here, take note. And I want you to get his book. You've got this great book, Victim to Victor, about overcoming adversity. Maybe could you maybe give like, who did you write that book for and why did you write it?
It's a great question. Well, I wrote it for a few reasons. The one reason was frame, right? And so when you're an author, you're framed more valuable. They'll pay you more money on stage. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is I believe that every day that you don't share your story, someone out there suffers because they haven't met you yet. And so I think it's selfish for you to keep your story in. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, I don't have no legs and one arm. Well, guess what? How many people relate to no legs and one arm? Not many, right? And so your ordinary story is actually extraordinary because it connects with people just like you. So we'll throw that objection out the window. And so everybody should be sharing their story. But I shared it because I know the pain that I've transmuted can condense time for others and they don't have to suffer as long as I did. And so I wrote that, and it's not just a book, but it's a book with strategic questions that will lead you to your strategic breakthroughs, whatever your own blessing, your own personal blessing. And so, I wrote that for a few different reasons, but that was the main reason was I know that I can condense time for people and it's my obligation.
Why is condensing time, like in your mind, for where you've gotten to, like hiring coaches, mentors, not just reading books? I always say books are just like they're like an introduction to changing your life. They're an introduction to mastering something, but you're never going to master anything from reading books, right? Because you don't retain books. Your brain can't retain the information. Why is hiring somebody like you said, like Tony Robbins or somebody who's already mastered the thing you want to master, why is that so important in life?
It's so important because when you see someone doing something incredible, they're not better than you. They know something that you don't.
Yeah.
But most people think it's a superior thing. But here, let me just disarm the objection. Like I'm 3'5", like you can beat me up. Like, it's just my brain. Right. And so the most dangerous information is the information that you don't know. And I'm a firm believer that you're one piece of information from a new life. Like your mentor says one thing, life change. They give you one strategy, one frame, one way to sell, one way to enroll, whatever it is, and your whole life will change. And it also, though, when the transformation happens before the transaction, but also during the transaction, because the moment you invest, you become the type of person that invests in themselves. So immediately your identity raises. And then when you're in school, you're taught that you're a cheater. But when you're in entrepreneurship, you're just a mentor. You just have mentors, right? And so in school, you're not allowed to go to the person with the source and the information, even if you pay them. And in the real world, though, where the real people operate and the real entrepreneurs is they find the information and they pay for speed because your time and your energy are your two most valuable assets. And by the way, it's like I want to get rich fast. I don't want to get rich slow. I want to change my family's life faster. I don't want to keep them, working.
You're obviously you're smart, you're high level, right? So I want everybody to listen to what he just said there. And I want to unpack this. It's really important for you watching Nick here and listening to what wisdom he's giving you. Most people, Nick, you know this, try to learn from their mistakes through trial and error. And they believe the lie that if they just stand long enough, if they just kind of go through it, that eventually they'll figure it out. And Nick, people like that, that's the path that leads to nowhere. real quick, right? So what Nick is telling all of you here is that the most successful people in life in any profession, sales, business, relationships, spirituality, like health, anything, they don't learn from their mistakes. They learn from other people's mistakes so they don't make the same mistakes themselves. And that's why their learning curve is 100x faster. And that's why you all follow these type of people, because they just learned from people who already made the mistakes. They don't make the same mistakes, and they learn all the great things, and they learn it really, really quick. Nick, if you didn't have that mentorship from Tony Robbins and these other people like Myron, where do you feel like you might be right now?
I can't even, I haven't reflected on that. I don't think I would, I look back at, I would have been stuck in a ceiling. I would have been, my identity would have stopped. I would only be making a specific amount of money. I wouldn't have equity in different things and know all these different business models. Like, I'm just a well of knowledge. And one of the, and just to reinforce that is like, one of the greatest things that you could do is just commit to becoming a well. We all start off as puddles, just commit to becoming a well. And I stayed in my lane, right? So like, I'm not telling you like I'm a crypto investor and I know tax strategy. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. I spent 8 years just studying communication and psychology. And that's why people pay me a lot of money. And so, as you know, just stay in your lane, become an expert that way. But also, in addition, who are you to say that you get to skip the season of feeling like an imposter? We all going to feel like an imposter in the beginning, right? We all have to go through the season of suck until we're great at something. And so I wouldn't, who knows where I'd be. That's a scary picture.
Could be trouble. Why is helping people so important to you?
Helping people is so important to me because my core belief is if I bless enough people, I can have anything that I want in life. If I help enough people get what they want, I can have anything I want in life. And also, even on a deeper level, I've learned this working with very high net worth individuals, is what do you give a millionaire or billionaire who can buy anything, buy everything? You give them a breakthrough. If you give them a breakthrough and you take them somewhere where they never thought before, it's an invaluable currency. And that's why people want to spend so much time with me. I don't have more money than these billionaires, but I make them think differently and they want that. So it's invaluable currency. And then also, wherever we go after this, I just know that when I transition from this one, they're like, yo, you made a dent, bro. I like, you went crazy. You went off. Like, you really fulfilled your mission. But I believe I was put in this unique vessel as a unicorn, and with the right now with the right skills to wake people up, and to remind them that nothing's missing, that you have all the answers inside of you, that a healer isn't someone that you go to for healing, but someone who triggers the part of you to heal yourself. That's what Jeremy and I just do. We're not saying we have all the answers, but we can help you access the answers that are inside you faster.
Yeah, I mean, what Nick just said here, everybody watching and listening here is so brilliant. What he just said is he's still mastering his craft at his level. I've got a lot of friends in the space as well, good friends with Tommy Mello, Pace Morby. I just joined Tony Robbins and Dean Gracione's Zenith Mastermind here soon, so I'm going to meet with them. Everybody that you guys follow, that you watch, that you admire, like Nick said, he's giving the wisdom here. They're no different than you are watching us right now, listening to our voice. What's the difference? Nick told you. It's he acquired the knowledge. It's what's up here. And like we talked about, he's not paralyzed in his mind. And so many, Nick, so many people, they have this mindset where they just feel like they can't do it for whatever story they keep telling themselves. How do you help people in that audience overcome their stories, limiting belief stories that hold them back from where God really wants them to be?
100%. So just breaking down belief is just a story that you've repeated over and over again until now it's deep into the brain. And so typically you want the opposite story, right? And so we help identify the story that is limited and then be like, hey, what would be the opposite story that would totally be empowering versus disempowering, but as well, stories are just held up by references. And so the reason why you have that story is because you have reference experience that reinforces the story. And so we go along the references and see how really true they are. But oftentimes we can dismantle a story by shifting focus to the evidence that they are enough versus the evidence that they aren't enough. Or like, for example, I'm not a good father. Well, in the past 2 years, could you give me just a few examples that would maybe suggest that you're actually a good father? Oh,
Mm.
well, actually this and this. And so
Yeah.
you get to shift the focus, and then you gotta reinforce it and constantly collect data in the world that reinforces the new story. But oftentimes, people don't even know that their story is limited until they say it out loud, and they're like, "Wow, that doesn't really sound good."
I love
But we do that just by asking the right questions and leading them to,
Mm,
what are these limiting stories? Where did that stem from?
mm, mm.
And by the way, most of your beliefs aren't yours. You pick them up from someone else,
Yeah.
and most of the beliefs that we pick up are money's hard to make, rich people are greedy, big boys don't cry, money doesn't grow on trees when they print money. These are all lies that we were told when we were young. And
Mm,
so most of your personal development for those that are listening won't really come from learning new things. It'll come from unlearning all the stuff you were taught.
It's so true. And being open to understand that none of us know everything. None of us, I guarantee you, know everything. We're always mastering it. And even to that father situation, it's all about the identity you make them. You can make that father into the father he wants to be. You could simply flip the script, as you know, flip the frame and be like, well, I mean, good for you for even admitting that there's some things that you might need to work on to become that father. I mean, your kids are lucky that they have a father like you that doesn't like, that's not stuck on themselves, that's open to like, hey, I want to be the best father I can be. I mean, I talk to a lot of dads, and you'd be surprised on how many think that they're the best dad in the world, that they do everything, and they're never open to learning how to get better for their kids. You know what I mean by that? And see, now I'm flipping them into a different like identity. Instead of like, I'm not a good father, now I'm flipping them into, well, good for you for admitting that you're not and that you got some things to work on. Now I'm
Mm,
shifting their belief system. That's not all you do, but I'm starting to reframe them into a different belief system. And then at the end, I might say, is, wanting to get better as a father, is that something you were like always wanting to get better? Is that something you were born with or something you had to learn? And now,
mm.
like, well, I had to learn it because now I'm flipping the frame. I love that, Nick. That was really, it's popped in my brain here. What's your future look like in the next 3 to 5 years? Where do you want to go in life?
Yeah, my my one idea is almost the IP is almost done, but I'm working on a 3-year sprint to a big exit right now here in Dubai. So that's the first thing. More details coming soon, open loop. I think more training, more serving.
Mm.
But actually at this point in my life, I'm really focused on being the arms and legs for kids who don't have arms and legs. And so
Yeah.
when I was born, there were organizations and groups that helped my parents financially for medical equipment, and maybe they needed some help. And
Mm,
now, being in the blessed situation that I'm in, I've created a foundation where we will raise money and go do mission trips where we give out wheelchairs and
mm,
walkers, or go visit a kid that has some challenges and revamp the house or something. And so I've had a shift very recently that the next few years of my life are going to be even more
mm,
filled with contribution
mm.
and crazy things, climbing Mount
So good.
Kilimanjaro, pushing the limits, just whatever I
Wow.
can to wake the world up.
Well, Nick, you're an inspiration to us all. I love watching your stuff, your content. Where I want everybody to learn more about you. Like, where can they go to learn about you? Like, maybe some training programs that you offer to get them to the next level. Or if they're, if they're like, I'm not sure I can do it. Like, where can they go to learn more about you, your programs? Some stages you're on here recently. Where can they go?
Yeah, so Instagram is the main platform. Instagram and TikTok, I'm on all the platforms, but basically I've created something that the best way I can put the picture in your brain is like a brain gym. So every single Monday, I go live on Zoom. People jump in all over the world, and I just rip it. You never know what Nick's going to say. It could be inner child work. It could be father wounds. You never know what you're going to get, but your brain is going to grow after those Monday calls. And of
Mm.
course, you get the community and there's other stuff. But I just wanted to create a place where every Monday I can just spit fire. And for those that want to be there, they're there, and build a community that way. So you can find that on my Instagram.
Okay, so it's on your IG, like your handle. They can go there because
Yeah,
the
the link's in the bio.
Okay, yeah, we'll
Yeah.
have the team here put your bios there, or your IG handle and your TikTok handle. Um, Anything I should have asked you that I didn't, Nick?
Oh, these were great questions. I think
Mhm.
you're an incredible influencer. I think you're incredible at what you do. And so I'm always
Mhm.
happy when people don't say, tell us your story, you know? And so I think you did an incredible job.
I want everybody, you know, the reason why we started this podcast, as everybody knows, because I want to expand their views of communication, persuasion, not just sales. It's communication, persuasion, sales in all areas of their life. And it's really overcoming adversity like you have and that you continue to do. And that really inspires them. Now, Nick, as you know, we can hear great stories like this and we can get pumped up, you know, for a day or two. And then typically what happens after that? We kind of go back down to where we're at.
Mhm.
So, Nick, I implore everybody, make sure you take Nick up on his offer and get into some of his training programs because, Nick, as you know, because you're committed to mastery, in order to change behaviors, we have to do daily actionable things to change those behaviors. And that's why Nick has training programs there for you guys to get involved in to really change behaviors, not just get pumped up because you heard us on a podcast. What are your thoughts on that, Nick?
Yeah. As you know, with a muscle, if you don't use it, you lose it. Right.
Yeah.
And the very belief that you think you'd master something is the belief that's holding you back. And
Yeah.
so I never want to be that guy. I used to be that guy, but I never want to be that guy again.
Yeah. Yeah. You're committed to mastery. I always say there's 4 types of people in life: those who wing it, wingers; those who dabble in it, the dabblers; the know-it-allers. Oh, think they know everything. They get capped. And then you have those who are committed to mastery. And you, sir, are committed to mastery. And I know everybody watching us and listening to us, I know you wouldn't be on this podcast unless you're committed to mastery. You're smart, you're high level. Do what smart people do. Get in with Nick, overcome some adversity. We all have it. Okay. And you can change your life. Nick, thanks for being on here. And everybody, we'll see you on the next show. And if you have questions, if you get some questions about, hey, how do I learn how to sell for what I do? Remember, I'm going to give you the number. Just text us. I've got this memorized at this point: 480-637-2944. Just text us to that number. And myself or one of our sales trainers, we lock ourselves in that conference room over here about an hour and a half a day, and we actually answer your questions. So, Nick, until next time, when I come to Dubai, we will hang out, my friend.
Yalla, let's do it. Thank you, my
Okay.
friend.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next time.